miles east of here, over to Greensboro. We are at Elon Law. She is going to be talking today about her work, interestingly titled Lessons from 20 Years of Data, Hoarding or Collecting. So, and there is a difference, which I look forward to hearing about. Megan, thank you for joining us today at the Wall Street.
Thanks, Leslie. Okay. So yeah, this is going to be hopefully more of a conversation. If you hear something you want to talk about more, just yell it out or whatever. That's completely fine. I organized this into lessons, but it really walks through some of the big concepts that are happening right now and in the recent past in the world of data. So data analysis and collection and all that jazz. Okay. I crossed out hoarding and wrote collecting because I tease that I hoard data. Like I make massive amount, big databases full of goodies. But really, the difference, I guess, between hoarding and collecting is that I feel like my data has meaning and might be useful to others. So I try to err on the side of making collections and not truly collecting just for the fun of it. So I guess we'll just jump into the first lesson, which begins here. Has anybody ever eaten at a Shoney's before? So I waitress my way, yeah, right, like, okay, maybe you want to forget that burger and fries, but I waitressed all the way through college and, you know, waiting tables, trying to make bucks to get through. And I had a manager there. His name was Ralph. He was a lot like Stan from Office Space. That's not me, no, that's Jennifer Aniston, I know. Tricky. But yeah, so he was like Stan. Ralph was always concerned with what we were wearing and how much flair we had on and all that good stuff. But he was also really concerned with the restaurant wasn't overly empty, that he was making enough money, that there were butts in the seats. And most of all, that his waitresses, and he was paying $2.13 an hour, weren't just sitting around bored with nobody to wait on, that he would send us home when traffic or customers were falling or the restaurant was dead. We'd have a cut list and he'd send us home. And to keep track of all this good stuff, Ralph kept a notebook, and it was his little manager blog. He'd be writing stuff down. He kept track of the date and the weather and what the temperature was outside and how many people came in and when were the busy times and how much was sold, and he would write down all the amounts from the cash register and which waitresses were giving him flack and, you know, smart mouth and stuff like that. He kept all of this good stuff in a log. And then he could make decisions based on what he learned. So for instance, on July 4th, he said, man, do I need 8 waitresses or 5? And he'd look up what happened last year and try to make that decision. So he kept a log of what was going on to make future predictions about what to do. And it turns out that this is a really common practice in the restaurant industry. Well, this is the first time I'd ever heard of it because I was 18 years old or something. I don't know what's going on. This is a page out of the manager's log for a restaurant. This is Ray Kroc's manager log for McDonald's. And this page happens to be the day they rolled out the Filet-O-Fish. Anybody ever been the unfortunate recipient of a Filet-O-Fish meal? Well, this was the first day. It was a cloudy, cool day. You can see that there. And he's calculating how much percent business was the fish, this brand new fish sandwich. It looks like up on the top, it was about 7.5% of the burgers sold that day were fish. But what my favorite part of this notebook is right here in the middle. You can see there, it says prediction. Fridays will soon meet or equal Saturday's sales, maybe even Sunday, because of this fish sandwich. Why? Because fish on Friday was the prevailing rule for how to eat in the 60s. So I took from this my very first lesson in data. Data can help you predict the future. And this one I tucked in my back pocket and kept it. I also, by the way, nowadays we call this data mining. So if you're in the news, you're reading about that, you might hear it called. We don't usually say predicting the future, but we will say something like data mining or data analysis, something like that. I also took Ralph's lesson about the notebook, and I started keeping a notebook for myself with all my goodies in it. And I even have one with me here today. It looks like this. And I keep it and walk around with it wherever I go. The notebook will reappear in the story later. All right, so I'm in college, I'm waitressing my way through, and I decide I'm going to go to law school, and they told me you can major in whatever you want if you're going to go to law school. And so I was like, cool, major in art history, that sounds really fun. Then at the last minute, I decided I didn't want to go to law school, but anyway, that's a story for another day. Specifically, I was interested in architecture, and within that, I really enjoyed town planning, so how towns and cities are set up. That's pretty cool. So I picked up some econ, some public policy majors, stuff like that on the side. And my big plan was to study cities and how they work. My favorite idea was to have, find a city where it kind of all like matches, looks really cool, and has a sort of theme, kind of a look and a feel to it, like Miami Beach. This is Miami Beach in the 50s. It's a collection of sort of medium-priced, small hotels. They all have this sort of candy-colored looking feel. It's the kind of place where your grandmother might go to retire, your grandpa, move down there after a long, productive life in New York and decide to live out their golden years in Miami Beach. And this was the reality for most of the 40s, 50s, 60s. And, it's your standard retirement community. God's waiting room, they called it. By the 70s and 80s, yeah, classy, right? By the 70s and 80s, sort of the Scarface years, Miami Beach was looking a little down in the dumps. So these, this clientele wasn't really putting a lot of money back into the hotels, and they were starting to fall apart. So this is actually Miami Beach in the movies with Scarface. Stories were starting to be written. Oh my gosh, South Beach falling apart. This is the place where you go to die. This is a terrible place to be. It's overrun with crime and drugs. This is from the Miami Herald, New York Times, and a similar article saying this is a disaster. Don't anybody ever go there. So of course I hear this fresh-faced undergrad who loves town planning. We're gonna bring it back. This place has, look at the bones in this structure. This has awesome possibility. And it turned out there was a bunch of other people thinking the same thing, including this woman whose name was Barbara Capitman, and she decided that she was going to build an Art Deco district in Miami Beach. Unfortunately, in 1990, she passed away, and her dream was on the verge of dying. What are we going to do? Some friends of hers decided to keep the dream alive, and they hired me to be an intern and come down and work in this lovely structure, or one very similar to it. My favorite part of this picture, by the way, is the leg hanging out of the window on the second floor. This is a really classy environment to working in as an undergrad. But anyway, I came into this hotel and was handed this collection of boxes which had all of her stuff in it, Barbara's stuff. That was the plans for how she was going to make this Art Deco district come alive. So I became very good friends with the staple puller and the file folder and the rubber band and the garbage can, and another guy and I sat in this hotel for 3 months all summer and organized her stuff. At the end of the day, we had a really nice collection. Everything was color-coded and nice and happy. My promised Miami Beach internship turned into the inside of a pretty seedy hotel. But when all was said and done, the people that we were doing this work for did manage to create that district. And now those archives that we organized all for Giddies are stored in the Welcome Center in the Barbara Capitman Archives. And she actually has a street named after her now. And if you've ever been to Miami Beach, you know that it now looks like this. And movie stars hang out there, and really rich models and gorgeous people all shoot inside this wonderful place. And Will Smith wrote songs about it, and Bugatti and all this. So, most excellent. Lesson from this one: organizing data is an important but thankless job. It's really pretty brutal. It's pretty glamorous. You're stuck in a hotel room doing pretty junky and tiresome stuff. Unfortunately, I can't sort of separate myself from doing the unglamorous and thankless jobs. I just wrote a book last year called Clean Data, and that's all about how to clean and organize data. And I don't know why this hasn't been that great of a big bestseller yet, so, but I'm working on it. Turns out, it is a thankless job. People would rather do the fancy stuff, so the data mining I could pretty shit. My third lesson came when I worked at Art Miami. So this was a series of art fairs that the company I worked for decided to put on. And what's an art fair? So an art fair is basically you bring artists and galleries and art buyers, potential buyers together, and get them all in one room, and art is bought and sold. The key to this equation, though, turns out to be the buyers. Because if you don't have anyone to buy the art, then it's just artists and people and tourists looking at art. It's a museum. So the difference between an art fair and a museum is that you actually have to have people that are willing to buy the art. So at some point, my task became finding rich people to buy the art. And this was very difficult. Turns out people want to say they own a Picasso. They might not want to say they own a Joe Blow, whatever who's that. I don't know. It's hard to say how good it is. the investment potential is more questionable. It's very difficult. So how do you do it? How do you find rich people to buy art in the 90s without the internet? Here's what I did. So I went and grabbed all their vehicle registration and I looked for the ones that had like really fancy cars. So I was like, yeah, if you're gonna buy art, you probably buy other fancy stuff too, right? Like airplanes. So I look and see who owns an airplane and make lists of those people and I cross-reference the cars. And then I look and see who owns a yacht, you know, and size boats. You know, they got a Cadillac, a yacht, and they went to flying lessons, no actually on the plane. And I would try to process and make these lists. I'd look up where their house was and how much it was worth, what the property tax values were. Try to look up, you know, is that a really a good zip code or kind of one of those marginal ones where there's a few good houses but not a lot. I'd call the Horse and Pony Association and be like, is this dude registered a horse? Because those people are probably rich, right? So you're taking all these data sources and you're matching them together and you're trying to make a profile so that eventually you can find a target who will show up at the fair and you can put the artist in front of this person. Maybe a deal can happen. Not like some of this marginally good art, right? So this was my job. Making the lists. It's data. Get the data, put it in a list, make sure it's not duplicated. What's that?
Sorry, I'm trying to figure out what's in his hand. Is that chicken? Or?
I think it's a scarf. It's a scarf.
It's a scarf, okay.
This is a new picture. This
Or
wasn't
a
actually
chicken.
from the
I was
last
looking
year.
at a rubber chicken. I was like, what is that?
You can tell this is a new picture because these guys have man buns on. So that was not a 90s style. They're not rocking the man buns in the 90s. I learned that data brokering is a thing. So if you put a bunch of data together, like it has more value after you put it together than all separate, right? This song is greater than the part. That's actually a thing. And now data brokering is really a thing, and it's all over the news. People are kind of marginally going by it. Companies are starting doing it. There's websites where you can go and look up yourself, and it'll tell you exactly how much your data is worth. There's also been some movement to cut down on data brokering a little bit, but people have always done this. Okay? Just because it's easier now with the computer, with the internet, with multiple data sources. But we've always done that. We've always collected data, put it together, try to learn about somebody. Tell sales, right? Trying to target people to buy what you're selling. The public is generally very bored with the idea of regulating data brokering. You know, it turns out they kind of don't really care so much about it. So a lot of the legal attempts to cut down and change it or regulate have really haven't really gone anywhere. I got tired of the data brokering business and I switched focuses and I started to work at a company. It's called Highway Technologies. You can run information. They spelled it. That's how they spelled it. Which got bought out by another company called Vario, which did similar things, which got bought out by the Japanese telephone company NTT. All of these companies were working on something that was called web hosting. And what that means is you're trying to figure out how to get 2,000 websites crammed onto one box that you can buy down the Austin Road. Not really, you can buy it from Compact or somewhere, but 2,000 websites running on one machine. So that if you want to have a website, you don't have to get your own server, you don't have to get your own machine. They can just stick you on the same server as this guy. What it turns out the question really is when you're looking at web hosting, the question really is this: how can I get 1,999 mom and pop shops running on the same machine that happens to also have one porn site that's taking up all of the bandwidth and memory? That turns out to be the actual technical problem we were trying to solve. Also, how can you get people who don't know anything about programming or the web to be able to run their own website without calling you every 5 minutes? So this was my job in the 90s when the web was new. In this story, the notebook makes another appearance. So meanwhile, all this time I've been keeping this notebooks, right? I'm much older now, this part of the story. And I'm writing down everything I do. I've also started grad school in computer science, but at this point I've had several .com jobs and stuff, so my engineering notebooks are precious to me. And at this job, where we're working on the porn site problem, I'm writing down all my solutions to this and all the ways that we're going to solve this problem. A couple of years later, I get contacted by some lawyers for GoDaddy who are being sued by Web.com over something called synchronized server parameter database patent that web.com claimed they owned, and which they claimed GoDaddy violated. And they were contacting me because I worked at the company that actually invented this technology, never bothered to patent it. And they thought that that might be prior art, and they wanted to know if I knew anything about this. And I was like, well, actually, I have a notebook where I wrote all this stuff down. And I had drawings, and I had source code, and I had shower thoughts, and drawings of kittens or something. You know, I had just whatever I was thinking about right in the notebook, and I had it. And you could hear the saliva. Like, they were so excited, right? You could hear it. And so they sent me the FedEx number like right then, and they wanted to really want that. I was like, you know, I don't believe in patents and stuff. Let me help them out, man. Help this part. We didn't invent that stuff. We invented it. Why should they get credit or something? They never should have had that patent back. And I just wrapped up the notebook and sent it off. And in 2010, I said, where's my notebook? Y'all never sent me that notebook back. And I shot off an email to the guy, the last known person that might have had my notebook. And I was like, I've given him all my, this was docket number, blah, 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 you know, trying to jog his little memory. And they won't give me my notebook back, y'all. Because it turns out I never should have had the notebook. I wasn't supposed to keep the notebook. Everything in the notebook, like all those shower thoughts and everything, were the property of the company I was working for, and they were not going to give me that notebook back. So now I have all my notebooks in the hole and all my other notebooks. So, lesson learned. I feel a little bit like Milton, excuse me, but I think you have my notebook. Yes, it's a little bit nerdy to be obsessing about a notebook, you know, 20 years later, but it's my notebook, dang it. Never throw your data away, because someone might find it useful. It's my fourth lesson of the day. Bonus lesson, though, that someone that finds it useful probably won't be you, or may not be you. And bonus lesson B, always make a backup, because the person who finds that data useful may not ever give it back to you. Take it, never give it back. You're going to be SOL. All right, so I got out of that business and went into another one. In this innocuous Durham Research Triangle Park, high-rise, low-rise, I worked for a company briefly called Plurimus, formerly known as Hoarding. We paid $1 million for that name, Plurimus, by the way. That's another job you can get, making up names for tech companies, nonsense names. Yeah. Plurimus introduces new data collecting methodology. So what we did at this lovely company was we collected data. And here's the patent that somebody in my company put together. So what we did was, here's you, user. There's the internet over there, so servers. And what we did was we went to your ISP, like Time Warner Cable or Comcast or wherever you're buying your internet service from. We convinced them to let us put a box on their network and watch all the traffic go by. And then we sent the traffic to our big servers over in Durham, big old mainframe stuff, big gigantic machines. And we would just watch the traffic go by, and then we would look for patterns in it, so we mine the data, look for patterns of what was going on the internet. And the idea here was that we could have more knowledge about what was going on the internet. At some point, we're going to make money from this, but I think we only sold one product at the time of this company. But anyhow, so here's an example of some things that we would find. We study banking sites and say, well, customers on this site are more loyal because they go 10 times a month versus these only go 5 times a month, whatever. We were trying to make findings, trying to make patterns from this internet traffic data. Anybody starting to see some issues with this current business plan at all? So it turns out that you can't really be putting these collection boxes in the ISP to like watching all the traffic and then reselling it. So at the time, it seemed like a great idea. It's like, oh, it's a big deal. They said we could put it there. We're not using your name. We're gonna like call you a number or something. Right? It was really a big deal. So one of my clients here was a large motor for car company. And they hired us to find out what the competitive car company was doing, and so we would write up a report saying what was going on there. So it's just like that. Seemed like a good idea at the time. Got a bunch of investment and ended up bankrupt. Part of that. Yeah, that was a good job. Nice plan, right? Doesn't feel so nice when you're on the receiving end of that, that pun. So just because you can do something with data, this was a really valuable lesson. It doesn't mean that you should do this with data. I mean, this was probably a really pretty bad idea. So I decided to get out of that entire business entirely, just the whole corporate, like the whole .com thing is just not working for me at all. I have this graduate degree, you should do computer science. Let's go do some good. So back to the ivory tower I go, and now I use data to study how software is made. We're coming up on the final lessons here. Specifically, I study how open source software is made. So this is data where nobody can complain that I'm looking at it because it's already been put out into the open, right? It's specifically been put into the open, not just for people to look at, but for people to change and modify and everything. Fine. Finally, I'm doing something on the up and up, right? This is good. Here's how it works. So there's a software team up there, and the software team's working hard. They're writing some code, and they're chatting with each other, and those chat logs are all kept for all of eternity because they want new members to be able to see what went on. They're sending emails, and those are all open, and everybody's reading each other's emails, which is great. And they're fixing bugs, and they write bug reports on all of those. All of this stuff's open and available, and I can study it and learn whatever I want from it, and do whatever I want with it, and it's great. All those artifacts. I clean them up with my mop bucket, which I'm very, very good at, and I put all of that into a giant database where I do machine learning and give the results back to the research community as a whole. And I put little graduation hats on them. It's the research community up there, okay? So this is what I do, and the result of this is that we're going to get better software. We're going to be studying how the processes work. And we're going to get better functioning teams because we'll know what processes work and what don't, and we'll be able to fix how software is made. And ultimately, we'll be able to destroy, that's the wrong place, right? That's perfect. So open source software has been proposed as an alternative method for making software as opposed to Microsoft or something like that. Here's some examples of some work that I'm doing right now that uses open data. It's just out there for anybody to access and use. Linus Torvalds, the founder of Linux, really likes to curse as part of his management style. Really likes to sort of like shame and humiliate his developers. And so we're wondering, did that work? I don't know. Let's study it. How about a boss of this guy? I don't know. So I could go grab all those artifacts, right, and study them to try to figure out whether he's a good boss or not. Right now I'm working on this paper with one of my undergrads and a colleague. And we're looking at how much Linus curses and what actually, I promise you guys profanity, so here they are. How much does he curse? What flavor of cursing does he like the most? Compare him to another leader on the same project so we can sort of have a control group, right? And then we can actually do those prediction models that I was talking about earlier to predict if given a new email, this is more like Linus, this is more a different leader. So yeah. Love my job. It's so awesome. So it turns out, Linus doesn't care, bro. He does not care that I'm saying, hey, do you curse a lot? What about that happy about it? In fact, he's saying, yeah, I curse a lot, and then I'm going to curse some more while I'm telling you why I curse a lot. It's like he doubles down on it. So it's just so fascinating. It's just so awesome. In fact, some of the people that we're talking about this issue, trying to figure out, what's a better way to make software? We're being called social justice warriors and speech police and things like this. Speech and culture policing because we're just studying the data that's out there. So it turns out you kind of can't win. Either I study data that, a data broker and that's kind of bad things, or I try to study something that's totally open and make the world a better place and then get in trouble for that. Data mining can make people really mad at you. This is the lesson. Another lesson. But when I'm starting to feel sorry for myself, I think about this guy. Anybody recognize him? Aaron. So Aaron Swartz was also a data hound. And he was a data liberator, actually. When I think about what the kind of work that he did, it makes me feel a little bit better about the limits by myself. So he was working on projects that would sort of free paywall items like court records that everybody should have access to. He wrote Dead Drop, which is now Secure Drop, which is a place kind of like with leaks where you can put information out and sort of share it with people that need to see it. He was ultimately arrested, and this was the quirk documents for his downloading of JSTOR, which is a big academic database. And the zealous prosecution in this case disciplined for his suicide in 2013. So groups like groups like Anonymous are saying, hey, academics, you can export Aaron, put all your PDFs of all the papers that you published out so that anyone can use them. That's pretty good. So I created multiple buddies and I created something called Floss Hub, which for our research community, the Floss Free Libre and open source software community, is a place where people can share their academic papers and sort of circumvent some of that paywall activity. We started off with 800 papers and ventured another 800, so we now have some 1,600 papers in there that are free for anyone to use. Just we have PDFs rather than having to go through those other mechanisms to get that stuff. Lesson, even if people get mad, the data wants to be free. And there are sometimes ways that we can do that within the law. Preprints of papers, for instance, that's allowed and legal, and we should do that when we can. Those are my lessons. I'd love to hear your feedback. Tell me where I should go over the next 20 years and things that I might be able to do differently.
That was great, Megan. I got a couple questions.
Yeah.
One, did Linus find out about your work? What did you find out about Linus finding out about your work through media reports or a reporter?
So
or from an artifact?
let me
where
explain
he's found them talking about you?
I took a few liberties there with the middle finger picture. That wasn't really to me. That was to Nokia, which is a company he was annoyed at in a different incident. It was mostly, I'm not sure Linus even knows about our work. I mean, maybe he does. It's mostly Linus is what we call fanboys. So it's the people who work around him and for him. And when studies like mine come out, there's been more than just mine, but when studies like mine come out, they, why are you saying that about him? He's a great leader. He curses because he cares so much and that sort of thing. So now the media will go to Linus and say, hey, people are saying he curses a lot. And I see it in that, and it's pretty true. What do you have to say about this? And he defends his right to. He says it's his cultural way. He's Finnish, and he sees something. So I looked into that for a little bit, and that's actually really interesting. Do people curse more in Finland? So my browser history is insane. I actually have a bit in that last paper that I'm doing about Finnish, specifically Finnish curse words, because I don't speak Finnish, so they're hard for me to find in the artifacts. But yeah, we have ways. We're going to find those Finnish curse words and see if this is true.
So I'm just, sorry. Do you think your academic interest is a product of your private sector work? So like you said, when you go back and try to connect the dots for reverse, are you kind of a prosecutor who turned into a capital defense lawyer?
I have no idea what that
You used to put people to
because
death and
because I worked in the dirty part, like so,
Right.
yeah. I feel really bad about that.
And therefore this.
I do study open source because I've always loved it and been sympathetic to it. And now that I can, like, I can get a paycheck and still study and do the thing. That's good. And also, it does wear you down trying for that many years to separate people from their mind. It just wears you. You just don't care anymore. It's like I can't do this anymore. Plus, while you're doing it, you're not even getting it. It's like 5 startups in a row, one after the other. That's just exhausting. And it's like, I just have to. A lot of people are worried about search engines like Google and other ones compiling your information based on your search history. So do you think there's a difference between what you do and how search engines compile information? Difference, like there's technical differences, obviously. Legal, I have no idea. Speak to that. I don't know. I mean, I guess the purpose of what they're doing is developing. I think they're doing profiles, so a form of the brokering. We're also doing some prediction. So, for instance, when you get when Google tells you that a message is spam, it's doing basic data mining. That's a helpful service. I like that. I like having my spam box and junk goes in there. So I think sometimes they're using what they know about us and about the way the internet works to do good things like spam filtering. Then other times they're doing it for like targeting ads to me, and that makes me feel kind of. That's it. By the way, that's another thing. Nobody likes ads. It's really frustrating to work on a product that absolutely no one likes. People making them. That's really frustrating. So yeah, I think the technologies are the same. So what we have to be careful of when I'm working on some new way of detecting something or some new prediction algorithm is to say, man, I know I'm using this to study how software is made, but it's just math, and somebody else is going to apply that to God knows what. And so I don't know how. Sometimes I get frustrated with how responsible I am for that. I don't know. Like, and Google goes the other way. They might create something that's really cool and helps our lives get better and be more productive on our machines. And then they publish the algorithm and it gets used for even worse purposes. So I don't know if that answered your question. It's a deep. That's a lot of stuff that's happening there. Yeah, what do you think?
So so I'm a fan of New York, and I'm really tempted to ask you more questions about foul language, open source.
I am happy to answer that.
No,
I need more tables.
Well, and that's that
It's not
table.
just foul language, he likes adverbs.
And like that, yeah,
It's
description.
actually really basically, he has a way of talking that we can discern and we can actually make a line spot.
And I think that clearly your table has a place well beyond this presentation.
Yeah.
But I wanted to ask you just at the top level about the main big data and the phrase, because it's become it's being used so frequently, not just obviously in your field, but in regulation, that it's unclear what it means.
Yeah, we're not sure either.
Yeah.
Sorry. So a lot of people say big data is anything that you can't fit in a spreadsheet. So when your spreadsheet starts lagging, that's big data. That's just inconvenient of the size. That's not truly big data is also measured not just in the volume of the data, but they say the 5 V's, and I don't want to be able to remember all 3 of them, but velocity, how fast is data coming at you? When I was working at Farness, we were getting, I'm going to say it was like 10 gigs a gig every 10 minutes or something like that. That volume would be much, factor, orders of magnitude larger than that. So it's the volume, it's the velocity. I forget, there's some other V words like veracity. Is it valid? Is the data valid? Putting all of those together can tell you if the data you're working with is truly big. And then, so what? So it's big, so throw more technology at it, throw more micros at it, throw more processors at it. What do you have to do to make sense of it? And those are the technical problems that we're working on. So trying to figure out, okay, so I have a lot of it, but what is it? What part of it is useful? What do I do with it next? Plus just the managing of that many bits.
And so that would be, you said, what should I do for the next 20 years? So here's my insight. Which I have no authority to give you. Would be, trying to translate this idea to lawyers who don't have a technological background. As you know, it's a gigantic issue, and there are very few people attempting to do it because it is insurmountable. I'm not even thinking about it from a policy standpoint and trying to get into the political process, but I just mean for lawyers themselves. And I think those levers you mentioned are all levers that are familiar to lawyers. We need to wrestle with data, right? When we're reading opinions, or when clients come to us with facts and they don't tell us the story the way we'd like it, they just tell us their story. So that might be a nice, bridge from a legal standpoint to this work.
So I'm not saying this is one of those things that you start to see a pattern when you get old, like you can see things changing. And maybe I'm making this up because I'm biased or something, but I'm starting to notice that might intersect with what you're saying is I'm starting to notice people are intentionally acknowledging the role of data in making decisions and as evidence. So there's this other whole line of evidence where you do like in journalism, you interview someone, or you put someone on the stand, it's their testimony. This whole this idea of data journalism, and that the data is a better, different type of evidence, that to me is really bigger now than it was. Maybe I just see it more now, I don't know, but the idea that data is more important than it was.
Are you talking about the Nate Silvers of the world?
Yeah, it's at the forefront of we have to make data-driven decisions, not just the gut. People are the gut used to be sort of this
Moneyball,
that's how we do, right?
baseball.
So that to me, that's data in that way seems to be getting more clout.
That's only if you know what you're supposed to measure and you look for the right indicators.
There are people that don't know what they're talking about, talking about maybe data-driven precision, and they have 2 data points and they go, okay, yeah, you use data. But the fact that they would even make that argument tells me, wow, you think data's important.
I was interested in your slide about data wanting to be free, and you work with
That's a
open
bit,
source.
Like, let's all
Now, I used to
say
say that
Kumbaya
when
or
the
something.
master, the
Yeah,
music
yeah.
wants to be free. But I guess, as lawyers, part of the work that a well-compensated group of lawyers does is to protect intellectual property,
Yeah.
right? And so what's your view on what data should not be free? I mean, so for example, should you, or is it just, I was hearing something today.
Super personal now, but.
yeah, no, I was hearing something today about,
I really think that data and code should be licensed in a way that provides access to users to view it and change it. So I believe in derivative. Now that's tougher with data than it is with code. Because data, if we're going to treat it like it's an answer to something, then we can't go and change it. Right? So that gets a little.
I guess
Yeah,
what I was thinking
licenses.
about was, there's a lot of personal data, like not just where you go on websites, but in medical data. That could be, I think, really useful in developing new medicines and all that, but should I not get to
Yeah, you
choose
can do what you
my
want.
data?
You can do what you want. I like to think about can I be radically transparent with my data? I put every date. If a group of us put about ourselves, what would that change? What would that do? Think about this all the time.
What's your answer? What do you do?
I don't know, because I keep trying to get people in a conversation with me about it and they get freaked out and they leave. So like, if I put
Well, what kind of
everything,
data are you talking about?
everything. Like think of a piece of data.
I'm sure it could all be
All your
used
photos.
by the market somewhere.
All your,
someone could
yes, and it could, and
ultimately just
I
be-
would be like I was saying, I don't care. This was good. Turn the camera. But I mean, I think about this constantly, like all my student emails, all my emails, all the photos, everything. You just put it, just radically put it all out.
Well, ask Hillary Clinton about that.
Well,
All that should be answered.
But it may be different if you know it's going to be.
yeah, I know it, and I don't know what that would feel like. Because I don't know. That's something I think about almost every day. Think about why are we so resource?
Well, I mean, would you put professional being out of business? Would you say there should be no intellectual property protections?
Well, no. I think if you decide you want a license or you want some rules around your stuff, then that's on you. But I would encourage you to not do that, and that's on me, right? And I can, for myself, choose not to put strictures like that on. But I'm not going to infringe on you.
So Microsoft should continue to do what they want. I mean,
Yeah, they can totally do what they want, but I'm going to encourage every single person that I meet to not do that.
So how does that mesh with your earlier statement? Were you concerned about your algorithms?
Yeah.
That you
So
kind of
that's
lose
on
sleep
them,
at
not
night?
on me. So if
Right, but you
I
want to
write,
encourage
yeah,
other people to do it, but at the same time, you're saying, yeah, but there's information that I'm creating that I'm not willing to do.
no, I always let it go. Like if I make an algorithm, we have to free that, but it does worry me, and I hope that people don't use it wrong. They don't, but I still put it out. Like all the code goes out, all the data goes out, everything. All these data, almost 70,000 data sets. They're all open for anyone to use. I don't even have a login. Just go get it. But at the same time, that makes me go, man, please don't take all the Linus cursing and say that he's some moral failing. Just like just report the facts, right? Or encourage him to be less mean. Or count up how many times this happened.
Well, about Linus, if you measure his language and you're supposedly looking to see whether he's an effective leader, how do you measure his effectiveness? How do you relate his language to his effectiveness? How do you do that?
So I didn't try to set that standard. What I used was an incident that happened in the news. Senior developer that was on his teams kind of called him out publicly for X, Y, and Z. And so I just went in and studied, does he do X, Y, and Z? It's just very journalistic. I tried to be very reportage. I tried to just report what I was correct. I maybe wrote some algorithms and programs to try put all that data out. Now, if somebody wanted to layer a moral, thing on top of that, say he's a bad person and he should be this or that fired, whatever. That's not what I intended. That's what I worry about though. If somebody would do that, they'd take what we did that was very much about facts and data and sort of
Which is your algorithms and using for.
yeah, and that's just the risk, right?
So for advice for lawyers, I mean, moving forward, because I don't really know anything about computer science or anything like that, but I do have a strong interest in intellectual property, and I consider myself more of like a IP traditionalist, like I don't believe in strong patent rights, and I don't believe in strong, I get what you get, and then at the end it goes into the public. But when you start thinking about data and these algorithms that can do things beneficial, like move messages to my spam folder so I don't have to be bombarded with them, but then they also do very kind of icky things, especially in the United States, like when Target anticipated a teenager's pregnancy before she even told her parents by collecting her data on what she bought. So obviously that becomes like, I guess, more of a regulatory issue on our end, because you said you can make an algorithm and use it for good, and then somebody can take it and use it for bad. So where is that line? Where do you think that line should be?
Well, one of the interesting questions you kind of started talking about, not really, is the difference, like you talked about patents, but those algorithm patents would be what we call software patents. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of discussion about whether those should be patents.
Yeah.
Can Target patent the decision making?
And Amazon, I think, trying to get a patent on their inventory shipping.
Yeah, so there's some questions around that. I guess I don't know enough about the law to make a really good opinion, but my knee jerk is that's that makes me annoyed, right? So so that's an issue that I'm kind of following. And there's differences around the world. Like Europe treats that question
very much so.
Sorry, I don't
We have time for one more comment.
All right, what you got?
So I was a political science major.
Awesome.
I'm a 1L. I don't know much about IP yet, but from
We're in it together.
considering the data from a social norms perspective, how does having that much information free flowing impact kind of the traditional class system? Like, are there people that are studying the ways that
There's a class system in knowledge too.
yeah.
Like I can throw all those data sets out there, but access to them knows how to use them.
Right.
Yes,
Yes, that's what I'm asking.
Yeah, there's the
I
how
get making it available, but if it's available and there are people who have the savvy and the skill sets to utilize it, like you say, for not so good purposes, how do you combat not having it be so restricted, but having people who are maybe less sophisticated be protected?
So I mean that's the sort of bubble it up from the bottom. Everyone has the right to access and do that from day one. And a lot of people, the reality is that we're not all equal in terms of how much we know and what we know to do. And so what we're finding is these data sets become free, the algorithms become free, the software becomes available, and who uses it first? People that are trying to separate you from your money and make it back. And the people who actually need to make social change, who actually need to get stuff done for good, are just behind. I just keep putting stuff out there and hope someone else smart will take on that mantle that I really.
We have a million law students,
I know.
so I want to thank Professor Squire for being here. Our next speaker will be Wednesday, March 2nd. Derek Blackhalf is on the faculty of Education School. It was wonderful. So thank you again, Megan, and thank you for coming today, and see you soon.
All right.